All right, so let's jump right back into where we were. I just want to remind you exactly where we were. So what I did is I took you through this particular example. Let me make this a little bit smaller here. So the key idea with respect to perfect competition sort of starts with the idea that we want to be able to establish what the profit maximizing level of production actually is for the firm. And then sort of after that, what are the profits of the firm? And then after that, we're going to, again, change something in the market and then ask ourselves what happens to profits, right? Economics is a study of change. Microeconomics is a study of choice under those changes. So what happens to firm decision-making when something in the market happens to change? And there's a really nice story here, ultimately. A nice sort of simple, maybe overly simple, but nice, simple story that we get to tell. Okay, so just where were we? The market sets a price of $7 in this particular example. The firm is going to respond by producing, again, where MR equals MC, meaning that the firm is going to produce 58 units. Now, I showed you how to go through to calculate profits last time here. But one thing I wanted to sort of point out, if I can do this without sort of being too goofy, is that visually, again, we can actually see profits here. So the blue line in this particular graph is total revenue. It's just price 70 times 58. Area of a rectangle is base times height. So we have a height of 70, a base of 58. Total revenue is just 70 times 58. And then total cost is going to be the rectangle formed by, again, what is average total cost at the profit maximizing level of production? Again, here that's 58 units. So we can see here that this red rectangle delineates our total cost, and profits are just total revenue, the blue rectangle, minus total cost, the red rectangle, and what we have left over is this little sliver of green here. And again, you get the 14 times the 58 units, which we previously calculated to be a profit of $812. Right? Just wanted to make sure that you get that visual. I like to be able to see it while also being able to calculate that. It was always important for me. And so that's probably true for a lot of you as well. Okay, now, let's tell a story, okay? One of the assumptions that we make under perfect competition is perfect information. Well, included in that idea of perfect information is the fact that at least one firm in the market is earning greater than zero profits. We'll make an assumption that says that if Todd's Terrific Tracksuits is making greater than zero profits, probably a lot of firms in the market are at this moment now currently earning greater than zero profits. Now, again, individual firm cost structures can be different from each other. So while we assume the firm sells effectively an identical product to every other competitor in the market, it doesn't mean that every competitor has the same cost structure. We can have higher costs firms, which means they're going to produce comparatively less than lower cost firms in particular. But let's imagine for a moment that there are a number of firms in this particular market earning greater than zero profit. Well, when we say perfect information and we also say free entry and exit, this implies that firms or people thinking about getting in the market, people who are thinking about becoming firms, in this case, the tracksuit market, see these profits. And then, hey, what's going on over there with those profits, And it incentivizes them to get in the market, right? So the idea here is that in a competitive market where there are, let's say, significant profits currently being made in the short run, this is going to create an incentive for firms to enter the market. Well, what happens when firms enter the market? Well, the supply of the product is going to increase, and this is going to put downward pressure on price. Right? Now, let's tell a little bit of a different story. That story makes a lot of sense to us, and we'll come back to that story in a moment. But let's also talk about another reason why market price would fall, right? So in that case, market price might fall because firms see the profits. Firms that are not currently in the market see those profits. They decide to enter the market because they see other firms earning those particular profits, right? When those firms enter the market, we expect, all else equal, the market price to fall, right? If supply increases in a market, All else equal, we expect the market price to fall. The other reason why the market price might fall is instead if there's a demand decrease. So if we imagine for a moment, as we're going to here, that this particular market, the tracksuit market, experiences a reduction in demand. The Sopranos is no longer popular anymore. People don't want to wear tracksuits, tongue in cheek, obviously. But let's just imagine for a moment that the demand curve for tracksuits declines, which we see here in the graph to the left. So we go from a demand of D down to a demand of D prime. As a result, the market price for tracksuits declines down to $45. Again, though, the firm is a price taker. The firm is going to charge $45 for this product. The firm has to now figure out at a market price of $45, what is my profit maximizing level of production? The logic does not change. The firm is going to take that $45 price. They're going to set it equal to marginal cost, and they're going to find that at a market price of 45, their profit maximizing quantity is 49 units. So the market price fell to 45. As we would have predicted, the profit maximizing quantity for the firm has also declined in response to that decrease in market price. This is likely also going to change the firm's profits. So let's calculate the firm's profits after this particular price change. Okay, so we'll say profits, and then we'll just say P is equal to 45, and then we'll add here, P is equal to 70, right? Okay, so profits were 812 when the firm was able to sell their product for 70 units. So let's see what happens when the firm is only able to charge 45. Well, as we said, we know the firm is only going to produce 49 units at this now new lower market price of 45. And so total revenue, which again is just P times Q, right? That's going to be, in this particular scenario, the $45 new market price times the 49 unit profit maximizing decision for the firm. So at a market price of $45, Todd's Terrific Tracksuits is only going to produce 49 units of the product. Okay. We find total cost the same way that we did before. We take the profit maximizing production level, which here is 49 units. We take that straight up to the average total cost curve. Now, real quick, you'll notice here that different from before, now the average total cost is greater than marginal revenue. Probably matters, right? We can see here before that average total cost was lower than marginal revenue. Here, marginal revenue is lower than the market price. I'm sorry, average total cost, rather. Now, we go to calculate profits the exact same way that we did before. Let me bring the notepad up here. Okay, so at a production level of 49 units, the firm has ATC of, as we can see here, $55. So we have $55 for ATC times the 49 units for the profit maximizing level of production. And so profits when price is equal to 45 is therefore just going to be negative 10 times 49, which we can see is going to be negative $490, right? So as the market price for the product falls to 45 units, the firm responds by selling fewer units, by producing fewer units of the product. However, the firm still ends up losing money, right? So their profits have decreased considerably. They were positive 812, now they're negative 490. So obviously, the reduction in demand for the product did not bode well for the profits of the firm, and wouldn't bode well for the profits of any of the firms in the market. Our expectation, in fact, would be is that if I'm a firm in a competitive market and the demand for my product declines, my profits necessarily have to decline as well, even though I'm going to restrict my production. I'm going to produce less than I was before. It's not going to end up mattering at the end of the day. If the price I'm able to sell my product for is declining and my costs are not changing, my profits decline. The only reason why my profits would stay the same or rarely would go up in the response to the market price for my product declining would be if I was also able to change my cost. If I was able to dramatically lower my cost. Here, we're in the short run, there's no time to alter your costs. The market price has declined to 45. The profit maximizing production level has declined to 49, and the profits for this particular firm are now negative. Now, as a real quick aside, one of the things that students often get confused about when you're asked to calculate things like profits is profits when they're less than zero, because a lot of students come into an economics class and they think of profits as being inherently greater than zero. And so they'll go to calculate profits for a particular example. They'll calculate profits as being less than zero, and they think they've made a mistake because profits have to be greater than zero. That's not the case. To an economist, profits are total revenue minus total cost, whatever that number happens to be. We can see that when the market price is 70, those profits are nice and healthy, robust, 812 positive. We can see that when the market price falls to 45, now the profits of this firm are not robust, are negative than they were before. Now, what this generates for us is a really important question, which is, does this firm continue to want to sell their product in this particular market? Okay. Now, we're not going to sort of think about the idea that, well, maybe demand will increase at some point in the future. That certainly could be true. But in a way, we can't really rely upon that sort of logic, right? If the idea is that I'm only going to stay open if I suspect that demand is going to increase for this product in the future, that's probably not a good reason to stay in a market. We're going to have a much more simple, kind of straightforward set of what we refer to as shutdown rules. So basically, when would the firm, in fact, want to stop production and exit the market, to literally get out of the market, to no longer be a producer in that market? And under what conditions, instead, would the firm, even if they're earning something like negative profits, would they choose to stay in the market? Okay, that's going to be a really important sort of idea for us. And then again, we're going to take that and we're going to say, what happens as we go from the short run to the long run? What changes with respect to costs, for example, in the short run into the long run that may potentially alter the profit maximizing decision of the firm? Okay, so we can see that the firm now is losing money. And anytime a firm is losing money, the sort of economic logic here is that the firm is going to think about exiting the market. Doesn't mean that they will necessarily exit the market, but they're certainly thinking about it, right? Anytime you're earning less than zero profits, you know you're not necessarily doing well. It may not have anything to do with you. It might just be that the market is creating a price which is too low. It may just sort of create unprofitable kind of scenarios. Generally speaking, that does tend to happen. And so when you're earning less than zero profits, you're considering dropping out of the market. Now, we're ultimately going to have a very specific rule as to when you would drop out or when you would choose to stay in the market. And so let's get into that particular idea. So in the short run, we're going to have a distinct shutdown rule in the short run versus the long run, although they're very similar, but they're a little bit distinct. In the short run, as we have previously discussed, we have fixed costs, okay? In the short run, in order for a firm to economically stay open, they need to be covering their fixed costs, okay? Now, the way you think about this is that let's imagine two scenarios. A scenario where the firm makes products and a scenario in which the firm makes zero products, okay? In the short run, because there's fixed cost, even if the firm chooses to produce zero, they still have to pay their fixed costs. So at zero production level, we actually know what profits are. Profits are negative fixed costs, right? If I don't produce anything, I'm not generating any revenue, but I still have to pay my fixed costs. And so in the short run, if I choose to shut down, my profits will be negative fixed costs. So the shutdown rule for us is going to be at the current market conditions, at the current market price, and relative to my cost structure, am I covering my fixed cost? What I mean by that is, am I able to effectively earn a higher profit by staying open than I could earn by shutting down, right? Because we know what the profits are of shutting down, they're negative fixed costs. So I need to earn at least greater than negative fixed cost in order to stay open. Otherwise, it makes no sense for me to stay open, and I, in fact, should shut down. Now, this creates a fairly simple graphical rule for us, which is that the shutdown rule in the short run for a perfectly competitive firm is going to occur at the minimum of average variable cost. Now, I've spent all this time talking about fixed cost. Why then does the rule have to do with average variable cost? Well, if you go through and you do the math here, here we can see the profits of the firm shutting down. Again, negative fixed cost. And then this, of course, would be the profits of the firm staying open, right? We have total revenue minus total cost. We have the two components of total cost, variable costs and fixed cost here. If you just do the math and move some stuff around, what you get is this outcome. The firm will stay open as long as the market price is greater than the minimum of average variable cost. I'll say that again. The firm will stay open as long as the market price is greater than the minimum of average variable cost. Now, why is that? Why does that constitute a shutdown rule? Well, keep in mind, the vertical distance between ATC and AVC is average fixed cost. So if the market price goes below the minimum of average variable cost, this means the firm is no longer covering their fixed cost. So that's why that's the particular shutdown rule. Below the minimum of AVC, the firm is not only earning negative profits, but they in fact are no longer covering their fixed cost, and therefore they should shut down. Now, if the market price is between the minimum of AVC and the minimum of ATC, the firm is earning negative profits, but they should stay open, okay, because they're covering their fixed cost. Economically speaking, they would lose more money by shutting down if the price were in this red area, the non-dotted red area. If the price is in the dotted area, they should shut down because staying open actually is worse for them. Whereas in this non-dotted red area, staying open is better for them, even though they're earning negative profits, because the negative profits they're earning are still greater than negative fixed cost. Okay, so the minimum of AVC constitutes the shutdown rule. Now, the minimum of ATC is a very, very important point as well. The minimum of ATC is what we call the break-even point. Okay, so what I mean by that is that if the market price is such that the firm would produce at a level where MC intersects ATC, then that means that the firm would exactly break even. That means zero profits. And so if the firm produces at the break-even point, they earn zero profits. If they are able to produce beyond the break-even point, then they will earn greater than zero profits. And so what we have is a really nice sort of simple story to tell here, which is that as long as the market price is above the minimum of average variable cost, the firm will stay open. Now, the firm will earn less than zero profits as long as that market price is below the shutdown, but the firm would earn greater than zero profits if the market price were above the break-even price as well. And so we get this sort of nice decision rule. Everything in this class has been about decision rules, right? And so here we have some very straightforward decision rules. If the market price is below the minimum of AVC, which, by the way, remember, marginal cost always intersects the AVC and ATC curves at their minimums, right? That's that nice mathematical simplicity working in our favor again. And so if the market price is below the minimum of AVC, the firm should shut down, should produce nothing, they should get out of the market. If the market price is between ATC and AVC, the firm's earning less than zero profits, but they should still stay open because they're covering their fixed costs. And then, of course, if the market price is above the break-even point, then the firm certainly should stay open because they're, in fact, earning greater than zero profits. Now, As we transition from the short run into the long run, as we've talked about previously, what happens is we lose our fixed cost. All of our costs become variable. And so you can see here in the graphical representation, we no longer have an average total cost and an average variable cost like we have here. Now we only have an average total cost curve. What this also means is that in the long run, the break-even and shutdown prices are the same, meaning that the market price that would be the shutdown in the long run is equivalent to what the break-even price would be in the long run. So what that creates is a different decision rule in the long run than in the short run. Again, in the short run, I will produce as long as at the current market price, I'm covering my fixed cost, meaning that the current market price is above the minimum average variable cost. In the long run, however, I will only produce as long as the market price is break even or above. I will not sell at a price below my break even in the long run. So basically, the story goes is that the time period short run is short enough that I will accept negative profits, but I need to still cover my fixed cost in order to economically make sense to stay open. Then as I go into the long run, I have no variable cost anymore. And so now I will only stay open if I'm breaking even or better. If I'm going to make negative profits in the long run, I have no reason to stay in the market. Right. So that's the sort of key difference. The long run is a time period long enough where I will not accept anything but zero or greater profits. So if I suspect that I will make negative profits in the long run, I should in fact get out of the market. Whereas in the short run, I'll accept negative profits as long as I'm covering my fixed cost. The logic here is that things may change. I may get my costs down. That could help me become more profitable. There could be things that happen in the market that cause the market price to go up potentially. That can make me more profitable. So as long as in the short run I'm covering those fixed costs, I'm going to stay in the market. I'm hoping the market price will rise over time, and maybe I'm trying to work to reduce my cost to become more profitable. In the long run, however, I need at least zero profits. I need to at least break even. If I'm not going to break even in the long run, and specifically, downwardly, then I should get out of the market. I should not be selling in this particular market at all. Now, you may not have necessarily picked up on this, but at this point, this gives us a really, really nice story to tell. Okay. And that story to tell has to do with what happens when we take a perfectly competitive market and we transition it into the long run. Okay. Remember, firms are price takers. They're not able to set their own prices. The only things that firms can do in order to try to produce more over time is to lower their cost. The only thing a firm can do to try to produce more over time, to earn greater profits over time, is to lower their costs. So the idea here is that you have in a perfectly competitive market a bunch of firms who are always trying to break their costs down, always trying to get their costs lower and lower and lower, because it's the only thing they can do to try to earn more profits. And it's the only thing they can do in the long run to try to at least break even if in the short run they're currently losing money. They're currently having profits of less than zero. And so they're trying to get their cost structure down. We can see here in the two graphs, as we go from left to right, this would be this firm successfully being able to reduce their costs over time. And if the firm is able to reduce their costs over time, then the idea would be is that they could potentially earn greater than zero profits in the long run. But there's a problem with that story, okay? There's a problem with that particular story. And here's the problem with that story. As we have previously mentioned, we have perfect information. What that means is that if firms in a perfectly competitive market are successfully getting their costs down and are successfully increasing their long-run profitability, our expectation is that other firms will enter the market. Because other firms will see, hey, these firms are earning long-run profits greater than zero. There's money to be made in this market. I'm going to enter the market. What does that cause? Right? Firms enter the market, supply increases, all else equal, market prices fall. As market prices fall, now fewer and fewer firms are going to be profitable in the long run. And because fewer and fewer firms are going to be profitable in the long run, some of those firms decide to get out of the market. Well, what happens when that happens? If the firms get out of the market, this puts upward pressure on market prices. Okay? And if the market price rises enough, then firms in the market are potentially earning greater than zero profits over the long run. We expect firms to want to enter the market again. And if firms enter the market again, that market price is going to come back down. So basically, the story is that whenever there are greater than zero profits, we expect firms to enter the market, but this causes market prices to fall, which erodes the profitability of the firms in the market. Now, the firms in the market are feverishly trying to bring their costs down, which is fantastic for consumers because it means that the firms are trying to be profitable relative to efficiency. I want to reduce my cost as much as possible so as to maximize profits. It is taking the profit motive and making it completely a socially beneficial idea because the only way that firms can earn profits in the long run is by getting their costs down. By getting their costs down, this, of course, improves the situation for consumers. So anytime profits are greater than zero, firms are entering the market, prices are coming down. Anytime there are less than zero profits, you have firms exiting the market. This causes the market price to rise back up. And where does it stop, right? Where does it stop? It stops when we have no profits. So the logical conclusion to a perfectly competitive market is that we have many buyers and many sellers, and each one of those sellers over the long run is going to earn zero profits. Now, what's great for us from a societal perspective is that they're earning zero profits, but they are earning zero profits after having got their costs down as low as possible. And if they're earning zero profits after getting their costs down as low as possible, this must mean that the market price is quite low as well. And so the whole reason why economists are infatuated with the idea of perfect competition is because it generates, in a sense, the best case scenario from a social perspective when it comes to the profit motive, when it comes to the profit maximizing producer decision making. Because in a perfectly competitive market, the way that firms are able to maximize profits is by making their production cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And of course, as a result, consumers are going to benefit from this particular outcome. And so any sort of greater than zero profits is going to be eroded away, but it's going to be eroded away essentially through economic efficiency. So in the long run, all the firms are earning all the firms are earning zero profits. This sounds terrible, right? What firm wants to earn zero profits? But importantly, we're not saying all of the existing firms, all the firms that last in the long run, we're not saying they earn negative profits. So they're paying their bills, they're paying their employees, they're buying their capital. It's just at the end of the day, they're not growing themselves. They're not getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Well, from an economic perspective, this is actually good because what happens when a firm gets bigger and bigger and bigger, they get market power. And when they get market power, one of the things we'll learn next week, or towards the end of this week, is that the efficiency of the market declines. So the reason why perfectly competitive markets are thought to be, in a sense, perfectly efficient is because the profit motive induces firms to drop their costs as low as they can. This naturally incentivizes efficiency gains in this particular market. Now, the catch, of course, is that firms don't want to be in perfectly competitive markets. Firms want to be monopolists. Firms want to maximize profits. They want profits to be as high as possible from an incentive perspective. And so firms don't want to be in perfectly competitive markets. Consumers do. Consumers love the idea of perfectly competitive markets, but firms do not. And so one of the things we have to sort of combat from a competitive perspective is the fact that firms don't want to compete. And firms are always trying to figure out ways that they can avoid competition. And so when we start talking about market power, this is, of course, why things like marketing becomes really important, because marketing becomes a way that a firm could potentially generate brand loyalty And in generating that brand loyalty, that might give the firm price setting power, which is potentially important because when a firm has price setting power, now they can earn profits in ways that are not related to reductions in cost. In a perfectly competitive market, when the firm is not able to pick a price, the profit motive induces efficiency. We'll see later on that in markets where we lack competition, the profit motive induces a lack of efficiency. And I've said previously in the semester, economists like to say that good systems align self-interest with public interest. Perfectly competitive markets do exactly that. You have the profit motive of firms that causes them to make their products as efficiently as possible because they're not able to pick the price. When firms are able to pick the price, their decision making now becomes less about efficiency and more simply about profits. And so we lose that rational self-interest, creating public interest. Competitive markets, theoretically speaking, do this. And this is why ultimately economists are so infatuated with them.